Imagine coming home from work, and your front yard looks like a construction zone. Mud everywhere, tire tracks slicing through your lawn, straight to a porta potty dropped right next to your house. Your neighbor's house flippers did this. And they don't even apologize. Instead, things get personal. A windshield mysteriously cracks. Signs go missing. Someone even reports your own car as abandoned out of spite. But here's where it gets good. Months later, the flippers come crawling back with a $500 bribe, desperate to sell the house. What happens next? Stick around, because this revenge story is far from over. It all started on a regular afternoon when I noticed the for sale sign next door had disappeared. I didn't think much of it at first. Houses change hands all the time. And honestly, the previous owners had been quiet, decent neighbors. So I figured whoever bought it next would probably be the same. That illusion lasted exactly one day. The very next morning, I woke up to the sound of trucks pulling into the driveway, doors slamming, and voices shouting instructions back and forth. A house flipper had bought the place, and just like that, the quiet little street I lived on turned into a construction site overnight. If you've ever had a flipped house move in next to you, you know exactly what I mean. There's this sudden shift in energy. One day it's peaceful. The next day it's drills, hammers, and strangers walking in and out like they own the whole block. I remember thinking, okay, maybe this won't be that bad. Renovations happen. It's temporary. I'll just deal with the noise for a few weeks. But within hours of their arrival, the crew was already painting over the brick exterior and ripping out the original flooring to slap in some cheap, fake laminate. The kind that looks fine in photos but feels hollow the moment you step on it. It was clear from minute one that this wasn't about restoring a home. It was about flipping it fast and cheap for profit. Then came the part that really set the tone for everything that followed. They dropped a porta potty right on the side of their property, practically touching the line between our two houses. No conversation, no heads up, nothing. Just trucks rolling in, equipment getting unloaded, and decisions being made like my property didn't even exist on the map. It reminded me of when a new business moves into a strip mall and immediately repaints the shared parking lines without asking anyone. Small, but it tells you exactly how they're going to treat you going forward. At that point, I had no idea this was just the opening scene of a much bigger mess. I assumed it would just be loud for a while and then go back to normal. I had no clue that within hours, my own front yard would pay the price for their rush to get the job done. I left for work that morning without giving it much thought. The crew had already been buzzing around for a couple of days, and at that point, I had just accepted it as background noise. The kind of thing you tune out after a while, like construction down the street that you stop noticing after the third day. I had no idea that while I was sitting at my desk, completely unaware, something was happening back home that would set the tone for the rest of the year. When I pulled into my street that evening and parked my car right where I always do, I stepped out and immediately felt something was off. I looked down and saw mud. Not just a little splash near the curb. Mud smeared across the entire street, thick tire tracks cutting through the sidewalk, and then, worst of all, those same tracks curving straight across my front lawn. It wasn't an accident or a one-time slip. It was a clear, deliberate path. Like someone had decided the shortest distance between 2 points was simply through my yard. Property lines be damned. It's one of those moments where your brain takes a second to catch up with your eyes. I remember standing there thinking, surely This isn't what I think it is. But it was. They had unloaded a skid loader, and instead of routing it around their own property, they drove it straight through mine to drop their porta potty exactly where they wanted it. It's similar to how some delivery drivers will cut across someone's lawn just to save 30 seconds, except this wasn't a one-time shortcut. This was heavy equipment tearing through grass I had spent years maintaining. What made it worse was the audacity behind it. This wasn't an overgrown lot or vacant land they mistook for their own. There were clear boundaries, an established lawn, a driveway, every visual cue you'd expect from a residential property. Yet none of that mattered to whoever was operating that machine. It felt less like an honest mistake and more like a quiet message. Your property is just an inconvenience standing between us and convenience. Looking at the churned up grass and the muddy gashes running across my yard, I wasn't just annoyed, I was furious. This wasn't a minor inconvenience I could brush off. It was the moment the entire neighborly tone shifted, and I knew right then this was only the beginning of a much longer battle. I didn't even take a moment to calm down before walking straight over to the work site. Looking back, I probably should have taken a breath first, but in that moment, all I could see was my torn up lawn and muddy tire tracks, and the anger just took over. I marched up to the first contractor I saw and let it all out. I wasn't polite about it. I asked him who in the world thought it was okay to drive a skid loader through someone else's yard like it belonged to them. The reaction I got was almost more frustrating than the damage itself. Instead of an apology, I got shrugs. Instead of accountability, I got blank stares like I was the unreasonable one for being upset about my own property getting wrecked. One guy mumbled something about it being no big deal since grass grows back, as if that justified ignoring property lines altogether. It reminded me of times I've dealt with customer service reps who treat a legitimate complaint like an inconvenience to them, rather than a problem they caused. You explain the issue clearly, and somehow you're still the one being difficult. Eventually, someone tossed me a number and told me to call the boss instead of dealing with him on site. So that's exactly what I did. I called the contracting company, and then the porta potty company too, since their equipment was part of the whole mess in the first place. I explained calmly, or at least as calmly as I could manage, what had happened, expecting at least a basic acknowledgement, maybe an apology, anything that resembled responsibility. Instead, both companies pushed back. They claimed it wasn't their fault, that the path they took was necessary, that I was overreacting about just grass. It's the kind of response you get when a company values convenience over basic decency. Like when a moving company scratches your floors and tells you it's normal wear and tear, instead of just owning up to it. Nobody offered to fix anything. Nobody offered to even look at the damage themselves. It was deflection after deflection, and every call ended with me more frustrated than before I picked up the phone. That first confrontation taught me something important. Yelling on site wasn't going to fix anything, and reasoning with people who had no intention of taking responsibility wasn't going to work either. If words weren't going to protect my property, then it was time to find another way to make sure this didn't happen again. After getting nowhere with the phone calls, I realized something pretty quickly. If nobody was going to take responsibility voluntarily, then I needed to make it physically impossible for this to happen again. Sitting around hoping they'd suddenly develop a conscience wasn't a strategy, it was wishful thinking. So instead of waiting for another apology that probably wasn't coming, I decided to act. The first move was simple. I took my little Honda Civic and parked it directly in the exact spot where they had been unloading their equipment. No more clear path for a skid loader to roll through. If they wanted to bring in more machinery, they were going to have to figure out a different route that didn't involve my property. It's a bit like how some people put cones or chairs in a parking spot to save it. Except in my case, I wasn't saving a spot. I was blocking one entirely. My car became a barrier, plain and simple. But I wasn't done yet. That same day, I drove down to Lowe's and bought a stake and a no trespassing sign. There's something almost satisfying about turning frustration into action. The same way some people channel a bad day into deep cleaning their house or rearranging furniture just to feel a sense of control again. For me, that sign was my version of taking back control. I planted it firmly right along my property line, making it impossible for anyone to claim confusion about where my land started and theirs ended. Honestly, putting that sign up felt less about scaring anyone off and more about drawing a line. Literally and figuratively. I needed something visible, something that said clearly, this is mine, and what happened before isn't happening again. It wasn't dramatic for the sake of being dramatic. It was the only language that seemed to get any attention after polite conversations had failed completely. For the next week and a half, my Civic sat right there, parked like a quiet but firm statement, while I drove my truck instead, just to make a point. Every morning I walked past that sign and that parked car, and there was a small, satisfying sense of control returning. Like I had finally drawn a boundary that couldn't be ignored or argued away over the phone. What I didn't realize yet was that this small act of defiance was about to stir up a lot more tension than I expected. For about a week and a half, things felt strangely calm. My Civic sat parked right where the skid loader used to roll through, and my no trespassing sign stood firm along the property line. I drove my truck instead, partly out of necessity, but mostly out of spite. Every time I glanced at that little car sitting there, it felt like a small victory. I figured the worst was behind me. Looking back, that sense of calm should have been a warning sign in itself. During that stretch, I started noticing little things piling up in my yard. Stray rags, dust masks, bits of insulation, the kind of construction debris that drifts over a fence when nobody bothers to clean up properly. It's similar to how, if you've ever lived near a remodeling project, you know trash has a way of accidentally finding its way onto your side, no matter how careful the crew claims to be. I kept picking it up daily, more annoyed each time, but I didn't think much of it beyond simple carelessness. What I didn't expect was the comments. I caught snippets of contractors laughing nearby, joking that I had my property lines wrong, mocking the idea that my sign was even sitting on their land. It's the kind of dismissive mockery that stings more than people realize. Like being laughed at in a meeting for raising a legitimate concern, except this was happening right outside my own home. I brushed it off at the time, telling myself their opinion didn't change where my actual property line was. Then came the day I finally got back into my Civic after over a week of leaving it parked. I slid into the driver's seat, glanced up, and froze. My windshield was cracked clean across, a long, jagged line stretching from one side to the other, like something had struck it directly. There was no storm that week, no falling branches, nothing that would explain it naturally. It didn't take much imagination to connect the dots, especially after hearing the snide comments and sensing the simmering resentment from the crew next door. I couldn't prove anything, and I knew it. No cameras caught it. No one confessed. And chasing an accusation without evidence would only make me look worse. So I let it sit, frustrated but quiet, the crack slowly spreading further every day after that, A literal reminder spreading across my windshield of just how far this whole situation had escalated. After the windshield incident, things quieted down for a while, mostly because the renovation work itself started winding down. The constant hammering and shouting eventually faded, and not long after, the "for sale" sign went up in their front yard. I remember feeling this wave of relief wash over me. The same kind of relief you feel when a noisy construction project down the street finally wraps up and your neighborhood goes back to feeling normal again. I thought, finally, this nightmare is over. But I wasn't about to let my guard down completely. My "no trespassing" sign stayed exactly where I had planted it, even as potential buyers started coming and going to tour the house. I'll admit, the whole setup probably didn't look great. My Civic sitting there with its cracked multicolored windshield from a couple of unrelated hit-and-run dings, parked right at the edge of my property, with a slightly battered sign flapping in the wind beside it. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine, and it told a story without me having to say a single word to anyone walking through that house. Then one evening, I came home from work and noticed something missing immediately. My sign was gone. Just vanished from the spot I had carefully staked into the ground. It's the kind of small theft that feels bigger than it actually is. Similar to finding out someone took down a "beware of dog" sign right before letting strangers wander into your yard. It wasn't just an inconvenience. It felt like a deliberate attempt to erase the boundary I had worked so hard to establish. That same week, almost too coincidentally, my Civic got reported to code enforcement as an abandoned vehicle. I remember getting that notice and feeling my frustration boil right back up. Abandoned? I had been driving that car regularly, including that very day. It felt exactly like when someone files a bogus complaint just to cause trouble, hoping you won't bother fighting back. So I called code enforcement directly, explained the situation clearly, and thankfully, they were reasonable about it. They removed me from the list almost immediately once I confirmed everything was legitimate. Still, between the stolen sign and the false report, it was becoming painfully clear that someone wanted this whole situation erased quietly, without ever actually taking responsibility for what started it in the first place. Getting that abandoned vehicle notice cleared up was satisfying, but it also lit a fire under me again. I had spent weeks trying to handle this calmly. Phone calls, polite explanations, even biting my tongue when the realtor's receptionist clearly had nothing to do with any of it. But after the stolen sign and the bogus code enforcement report, something in me just shifted. I was done being the reasonable one while everyone around me kept pushing boundaries and hoping I'd eventually just give up. So that Sunday, I got in my truck and drove straight back to Lowe's. I bought a brand new "no trespassing" sign, but this time I wasn't stopping there. I also picked up a roll of bright orange paracord, the kind you can't possibly miss even from across the street. It's a bit like when someone keeps, accidentally, ignoring a quiet warning sign at a construction site. So the company finally puts up bright caution tape instead. Sometimes subtlety just isn't loud enough to get the message across. When I got home, almost like clockwork, my old sign had mysteriously reappeared, propped right back where it had been stolen from. The timing wasn't lost on me. The realtor had clearly waited until I left the house to quietly return it, probably hoping I wouldn't notice or wouldn't make a big deal out of it. But pretending nothing happened wasn't going to smooth things over with me anymore. I didn't just put the new sign up. I went all the way around my property line with that bright orange paracord, marking every single inch of it clearly enough that no contractor, realtor, or potential buyer could ever claim confusion again. It felt similar to finally installing a fence after years of someone accidentally cutting through your yard as a shortcut. Not aggressive, just impossible to misunderstand. Standing back and looking at the bright orange line stretching across my yard, paired with the sign standing tall again, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. This wasn't about being petty for the sake of it. It was about making sure that anyone walking onto that property, whether buyer, realtor, or worker, understood exactly where my land started and theirs ended. I didn't know it yet, but that clear, unmistakable boundary was about to make the next move from their side far more desperate than I expected. A few weeks went by after I put up the new sign and ran that bright orange paracord around my property line. The house next door kept sitting on the market, and honestly, I started to enjoy watching potential buyers walk up to tour it, only to be greeted by an unmistakable boundary line and a sign that practically screamed something wasn't right with this property. It's a bit like when a restaurant gets one bad public review sitting right at the top of search results. It doesn't have to say much, it just sits there quietly affecting every decision that follows. Then one day, I came home to find a note taped to my front door. It wasn't from the realtor calling angrily or threatening legal action like I half expected. It was an apology. Months late, but an apology nonetheless. The contractor was now offering me $500 if I would simply take down my signs and remove the paracord so the house could sell more easily. Reading that note, I almost laughed out loud. After everything, the wrecked lawn, the cracked windshield, the stolen sign, the fake abandoned vehicle report, they thought $500 and a hastily written note would erase all of it. It reminded me of those situations where a company causes real damage, ignores you for months, and then suddenly shows up with a small settlement offer the moment it actually starts hurting their bottom line. That's exactly what was happening here. The house wasn't selling smoothly, and clearly, my little property line was becoming a bigger obstacle to their profit than they ever anticipated. That's when I realized something important. The real revenge wasn't going to be in some dramatic confrontation or another angry phone call. It was already happening, quietly, every single day that house sat unsold. So I made my decision. I wasn't calling back right away. Maybe not for days, maybe not at all. Every day that passed without my response was another day their flip sat stagnant, bleeding money in holding costs, taxes, and missed opportunities. I didn't need their $500, and I definitely didn't need to forgive months of disrespect with a sticky note apology. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't loud or aggressive. It's simply refusing to make things easy for the people who never thought twice about making things hard for you. At the end of the day, this wasn't really about a windshield, a stolen sign, or even $500. It was about respect. Something that was never offered until my silence started costing them money. Sometimes you don't need to yell, fight, or chase anyone down for justice. You just need to hold your ground, stay patient, and let consequences unfold naturally. That house flipper learned the hard way that cutting corners, ignoring boundaries, and mocking the wrong neighbor eventually catches up with you. As for me, I'll keep enjoying my coffee on the porch, watching karma finish what I started.